Hello and welcome to Profiles in Risk. Well, kind of. This is your usual host, Tony Cañas. For the next few weeks, we will be releasing some episodes recorded by our old host, Nick Lamparelli. These episodes were originally recorded to be released as part of his podcast, The Yellow Book Road. Nick has decided to sunset that podcast, so instead we are releasing those under the Insurance Nerds Profiles in Risk brand. They'll come out one a week on Wednesdays for the next few weeks. I hope you enjoy.
Going to have an interesting conversation today on analytics around underwriting, analytics around claims, analytics around fraud. And we got an interesting announcement here. I have Piyush Singh of Jeroen and Jeroen of Friss, who, if anyone has followed my podcasting, you'll know that we've had some conversations with Friss in the past. So we, gentlemen, welcome, and we start all of these podcasts with allowing each of you to have an elevator pitch. So before we make the announcement, Piyush, why don't you go first? Why don't you give us a little elevator pitch? Who are you, what you do, and then your own.
Piyush Singh, founder and CEO of Jeroen Labs. Very excited to be on this podcast. Really started off in a corporate career in insurance and decided I wanted to do some transformation across the industry, which is what led for me to start the startup Jeroen Labs, focused on small and middle market commercial underwriting efficiencies and enrichment.
Your own?
Yeah, Jeroen, and I noticed, Nick, you're not pronouncing my last name, but that's too difficult. I get it.
Morrenhof, how's that?
That's pretty good. Yeah, Jeroen Morrenhof, that's it. Yeah, I'm Dutch, and I've been in insurance 25 years. I love this industry, and it's also the love for this industry that I founded Friss. Because basically, with the very reason that fraudsters take benefits of the trust that insurers put in them, and we're all paying additional premium because of that. A lot of the chief claims officers said it's part of the industry, it's part of the cost of doing business in this industry. And that's my drive to prove them wrong from day one on the claim side, but also on the underwriting side and on the SAU side, so end to end. And that's what Friss is doing ever since. We are happy to support 188 customers in 43 countries at this time, almost 4, but I cannot announce that yet. Sorry, 43 countries that we can support, and basically our slogan is we help insurance make insurance more honest, and that's what we try to do with our products.
Yeah, and the impetus for this particular conversation is that you brought up underwriting. My understanding of Friss over the years was around claims, was around fraud. In a prior conversation, you correctly corrected me that, part of that is that we have to catch fraud before it happens. So part of that is underwriting. And that leads to the impetus for this conversation, which is Friss's acquisition of Jeroen Labs to enhance a lot of the elements of your underwriting. So why don't either one of you, why don't you explain the acquisition, kind of make the announcement here?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, so I'll start and then Piyush will follow. But yeah, I'm super excited to announce this acquisition. Piyush and I go a couple of years back. Actually, Piyush is one of the first persons that I've met when I decided to move to North America and expand Friss into the North American market. And he showed me why Chicago is a great place to live. And I think he didn't tell the full story there, but
you didn't go in the winter.
Sorry?
You didn't go in the winter, did you?
We actually, the meeting that we had with Piyush was not in the winter, but I have learned about polar vortex after that. Yeah, thanks, Piyush. I think what you think about Friss, Nick, is not uncommon, right? Fraud is very often directly connected to claims and even very often connected to personal lines, auto even, right? That's very traditionally thinking about Friss and about fraud detection in the insurance space. And that's not what we do at all, but that is definitely how people look at us. A significant part of our business, 30–40% of our business, is on the predict and prevent fraud or high risks from entering our book of business, next to obviously the claims business, which is a significant part of our business. But underwriting is and has always been a significant part of our business. And the reason for me to reach out to Piyush about 6 to 9 months ago is that although this is a clear story and we have clear references, it was also clear to me after working here in the US for 2.5 years that the US or the United States are not as united as we think when it comes to data sources, rules and regulations, on state and county level. So the complexity of underwriting is much higher than I ever expected when I first set foot here in this country. And although and that basically said, okay, well, there's a missing piece in our value prop that we use in all these other 42 countries that I referred to, but we're not able to provide that level of service to our customers here in the US. And looking at that missing piece, I've looked at a couple of companies, and Jeroen stood out for me with especially the subject matter expertise that they have, the products that they've built, and the complementary side in terms of product, but also in terms of culture and values. That was a match made in heaven. Maybe too easy to say, but that's why I reached out to Piyush. Obviously, we went through a whole process of courting and discussing and negotiating and diligence. But this is all done, and we're now happy to announce that the acquisition is closed, and that from now onwards, Friss and Jeroen will be provided as a completely integrated solution to the market. Piyush, anything to add, or should I give it back to you, Nick, first?
No. I think you did a great job. I had to convince him to come to Chicago. We tried to bring everybody to Chicago, including trying to bid for an Olympic city, right? So Chicago has great aspirations. We want to bring in great leaders. So that's why we got Jeroen to come in over here. And we also wanted him to experience polar vortex. You know, who said that he wasn't aware? We knew it was going to come. We wanted him to experience it. So, you know, so it's kind of fun to ride the bike in polar vortex for Jeroen. So I'm glad he got to do that, and he can put it off, check it off his bucket list. Anyway, that being said, really, I think it started off with a phone call while I was driving from Cincinnati to Chicago that Jeroen called and said there was interest in looking at us. What we look at, and what I'm really excited about in this whole possibility, is it allows us to expand and scale up as an operation. But equally importantly is we are all about value proposition to the user community. We are all about the relationships and understanding the intent of what the underwriters are trying to do and provide them that value proposition, which is what Jeroen talked about, the subject matter expertise and the product focus that we have. We had a great list of marquee clients. We continued to expand our footprint. However, we were at the juncture when we wanted that trajectory to leverage and sort of have that effect of, you know, we've got a good base, we've got a good foundation of customers, we've got a good product. Now we really wanted to get that acceleration because the need of the market was today. So while we were out in the marketplace ourselves trying to see, hey, could we do fundraising to scale up? The real need, what we understood in this whole situation, is that the market needed us now with the function and features. And I think looking at, as Jeroen correctly called, the complementary aspect of what Friss was, really made it a good solution for us to get together and gather forces and really leverage the expertise that Friss brought to the table and provide them the missing piece also in the whole process. So both from a technology standpoint, I think from a people standpoint, talent standpoint, I think it's as Jeroen called, a match made in heaven, because we provide the missing piece and Friss provides us the broader view of bringing underwriting and claims together. Friss also provides us accelerated capabilities at layering the AI and analytics on top of the data aggregation that we do. Friss also provides us the capability of, instead of it being an episodic underwriting process, how do you get into a continuous underwriting mode so that underwriters are made aware of the changes in the state of the risk insured and appropriate action that needs to be taken based on that. So I think from our standpoint, really, very excited at the possibilities. We've already seen the benefit of this in 2 weeks time frame in terms of increased inbound interest from the customer base on both ends. Jeroen customers interested in Friss, Friss customers interested in Jeroen, and kind of launching us from there. So that's sort of a quick snapshot from our standpoint.
So a lot of what this this acquisition can do for the combined entity now is you started to talk about how it can evolve underwriting and how it's done from that episodic, right, to from underwriters who are looking at things, hey, this account's coming up for renewal 90 days out, let's collect some information, to something that's more constant, like a pulse, right, so to speak. That's a significant departure from how from underwriting culture and how it's done at a lot of firms. So how are you guys, what are you guys bringing to the table in terms of the type of dashboard information, can you give us a little sense of the offering itself to maybe smooth out that cultural difference, right, from doing it in a way that's been done for, let's say, 100 years, right, on a 12-month cycle, to something that's like, no, you need to view this on a much more continuous level. How have you, or how are you thinking of resolving that? Because that's it, the value props there, but it's more, it could potentially be a cultural thing that where the customer is not necessarily getting the benefit of the value you're bringing to the table.
Yeah,
So
maybe maybe you can answer with some examples there as well, but maybe to elaborate a little bit on this prior to you give these examples, Piyush. But so I think that is also one of the reasons that we believe this combination is very strong, right? So if you look at the let's say standalone value prop of Jeroen, it was very often like, instead of 5 to 7 days data gathering, we now get all the data in 5 to 7 seconds. We've always been more an AI solution that from all these insights get to actionable insights and automate a lot of those processes on the underwriting side and guide the decisions with the underwriting departments in terms of how to assess those, I would say, non-rating related risks. And not only do that as you mentioned, at the underwriting stage, but ongoing, right? So we have this continuous monitoring already in place, for the most part on the personal lines, to be honest, and I think then Piyush will give some examples on the commercial lines as well, like making sure that it's not just that what the situation was at the underwriting stage, but just prior to renewal, but actually on continuously, right? So if an easy example is that if when it comes to proactive push messages, like if some of your customers gets on a sanction list, that's an easy example, right? You don't want to know that because you have an annual batch or that you have a renewal, but you want to know that at the time that this person gets on the sanction list, you want to get an alert, you want to assess, hey, is this still within our risk appetite or not? Or that the owners of a company that you're underwriting and you're getting into PIR data, if the ownership changes and all of a sudden a provider a towing company that you've been doing business for a long time, all of a sudden now has a different type of ownership, that you would have a different look at that, which might be, so that ongoing continuous monitoring is part of our product already, and we're going to put that AI analytics on top of the underwriting and the continuous monitoring on top of the risk insights product that Jeroen always offered. Piyush, and when it comes to, let's say, the cultural aspects, maybe Piyush can talk to that.
Yeah. So Nick, you're right. I think underwriters have continued to do episodic, and there's some tribal rules in there. You underwrite when it's a new issue, you re-underwrite if it's more than 3 years and there's been no loss, or you re-underwrite when there's a loss. Right? That's been the case. I think
Yep.
underwriters always wanted to get a pulse of the risk in the portfolio that they had. There were just no capabilities
Right.
that were easy for them to be able to do it. You cannot inundate them with too much information and expect them to be sort of in the continuous underwriting mode. So where this comes into play is obviously we specialize in sort of monitoring the risk along the way and checking on the risk quality as the risk is underwritten or it's actually endorsed or whatever the case might be. Where this now comes into play, and that's something that we had it on our plans, but obviously a lot bigger effort for us to do it than for Friss's capabilities for us to be able to enable it and then kind of go from there. So what Friss brings to the table is the whole mode of they have been in the continuous underwriting mode. They have done this in a personal lines. And where we wanted to get in was, hey, let's take a couple of really good examples. We look at OSHA violations, we look at health inspections, we look at contractor permits, we look at building permits. All of those are interesting and very, very valuable non-data collected information as of today.
Piyush, you put yourself on mute.
Sorry,
Yeah.
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I apologize. So people don't even look at that kind of information. So first thing we do is we bring that information to the front for people to be able to actually look at that. That's number one step. The second step is now, once I know that the policy has gone through a submission and been bound and all those things have been done, the next step really for people is I want to get alerts and I want to set up tripwires, as if I can call it that, that if some things happen, I need to be notified as an underwriter. So let's take an OSHA violation. If there's an OSHA violation that leads to a fatality, do I want to wait 2 months before the insured lets me know? Or do I want to know before? Or if there was an OSHA violation with some level of trauma to somebody, those are all situations where your risk might be developing in a different manner than what you thought they would be. And I can give you multiple examples. The nature of operations changes at a particular small business, small commercial business. I want to know that whether I actually provide that coverage or do I need to actually provide an exclusion in that case. So if I look at health inspection, if there were some critical health inspections that got done where there was, kitchen was really dirty or things were happening, I need to know that. And why do I need to know all those things? I think it's important because, and while that might sound on the negative side, there's also the positive side from an insurance company. I wrote a policy with 3 lawyers on their risk. Now they're going to have 5 lawyers on that particular account. Well, I need to charge more premium at the end of the day, and there's premium leakage. So I think the impact with all of that is both to ensure that you're getting the right price for the coverage that you're providing on an ongoing basis, and knowing that coverage is not static, it is going to continue changing. And in the world that we work today, that's pretty much a given. And in the pandemic environment, it's only become more pronounced, not less at the end of the day. So that's number one. Second is I want to understand if there are events taking place during the course of the policy that I need to be aware of, because if I'm aware of it, I can take appropriate action. I could probably provide an exclusion because a YMCA suddenly has started doing mental health counseling and I do not provide mental health counseling coverage. I could actually send risk control to go in on that particular risk because certain things are happening that could potentially lead to a high risk situation or a high severity situation. So I want to address that appropriately. So I think there's multiple situations where I think it's appropriate for the underwriter to truly be in much more continuous monitoring versus an episodic and then go from there. And that's where I think Jeroen rightly mentioned, they have had the core fundamental technology and the processes set in place to sort of get the triggers and get the tripwires and monitor it and alert people accordingly. We will bring to the table how do you actually catch those tripwires and send those messages across. So yes, it's a different model than what we're doing today, but I think the desire for everyone is to know the risk better and to know the risk better all the time, not just at underwrite, not just at issue and renewal time.
Yeah, I think in a world where, especially here in the United States, where the vast majority of business is conducted through agents and brokers, one
Uh-huh.
advantage that kind of sprouts out from what you just described is that this can solidify the underwriter broker relationship. Hey, we've seen this thing going on.
Mhm.
That puts the broker in an advantageous position with their client as well. So I like the example of failed health inspection with the
Mhm.
restaurant. Like that's something the broker should know. That's also something it allows the broker another touch point with their customer to be able to reach out, to be able to have both difficult and quality, valuable discussions with them about risk management. And it seems like having that additional party could be extremely advantageous to the overall of nipping it in the bud, so to speak. Preventing it from getting out of control, or preventing the change in risk from potentially getting worse or even catastrophic for that kind of risk, right? Have you internally discussed that about like the information advantage that comes on the distribution side?
I think from a roadmap standpoint, from our discussion standpoints with a couple of key players that we believe are good counsels to us as we plan our future, absolutely. And I think the examples I've been told is, come on, Piyush, we live in a world where a package, a small Amazon $10 package, is being tracked all along the way. And we have an insured risk with $1 million liability that I have no idea what is changing. Well, you think of just the dichotomy in that whole situation. A $10 package can be tracked, and we cannot track the change in exposure to $1 million liability situation.
Yeah.
That makes no sense to the person today, right? 20 years back, you mailed a package and you just prayed that everything would come in, right? But today, that's not the world we live in. We live in a world where we need to know instantly what is happening and what's going on. And especially when you have large liabilities and a very dynamic environment in which we live in, people want to know what is going on. People need to be aware and take appropriate action, right?
Yeah, you have that additional element as well where you talked about 5 to 7 days being shrunk to 5 to 7 minutes to be able to
Seconds.
accumulate
Seconds.
Yeah.
seconds.
Yeah.
Sorry. I mean, 5 to 7 minutes isn't bad either. Like, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. That changes the entire dynamic as well. Where the technology has been here, so that allows insurance underwriting, it allows insurance premium, it allows the entire operation to think about risk in a completely different way, knowing that this data is at your fingertips, right? And can
Mhm.
constantly be refreshed, and you can constantly monitor that. It changes the entire dynamic of it, and we've been fantasizing about this for a considerable period of time. Jeroen, you've been talking about this for years, anyways, and I'm sure other countries have been doing this. But what are some of the lessons you've learned in other countries that don't necessarily have these non-united, disparate data streams that we have? Like, where is this going? You probably have examples in other countries where it's like, this is here in the States, it's going to look a lot like that, which is far more advanced than what we're doing here.
Yeah. So if you look, and there's no such thing as a united Europe as well, right? So and I don't think a lot of people in Europe want to talk about the States of Europe, but so you cannot say that this is typically for a specific country. So it's different everywhere. But I think what you've seen, and especially seen with our customers, and even accelerated last year through COVID, is the whole digital transformation. Right, the expectation. I think the Amazon example was clear, but the whole digital transformation on the claim side and the level of automation there, but also on the underwriting side, and the expectations that customers have. And that is just rising a lot. And the role that we've been playing there, and is that we support, let's say, our insurers to safely automate. So when on the underwriting side and on the claim side, is it safe to automate these kinds of claims or applications? And the experience that you currently have with some carriers here in the US as well, it's that it's straight through, it's no touch, it's low touch, etc. Is what we see into the commercial lines as well, also with some of our customers there. Instead of having huge forms and a lot of data that you need to provide, being able to provide just a couple of fields, and able to get through that whole process completely automated or with very low touch, is something that we see the small commercial business evolve in as well. I mean, it's also hard to keep up the operational expense on such a policy in a competitive landscape. And if you have enough trust in the gathering of the data, in being more consistent in reviewing that data, and knowing that there is enough automation and enough checks and balances in place, that whenever there is a significant risk that you will be alerted, then you can trust the system to automate significantly more than it's currently happening. And so it's going to be more like, and instead of basically putting less skilled people to the job, which has happened over the last years in underwriting and in claims, we're going to put back more skilled people, but then they're actually working on those cases that need their skills rather than their data gathering skills. They actually need their underwriting skills to look at those exceptions that needs to be underwritten in a small commercial.
Yeah, I think Piyush, I think it on the underwriting side, having that granularity and that consistency of data helps with the current exposure. But having gone through this on the natural catastrophe side, what I have noticed in the 2 or 3 years where we've been doing this, where we've seen this a really big influx of data and analytics come in, is that we're much more open to offering new coverages. We're much more open to, because we're so confident now that the analytics is supporting the current business, that we can also use the analytics as either a proxy or the support element to stretch, right? To stretch the coverage, offer more capacity, like be a little bit more creative, solidify our capacity element to the market. I would suspect, Piyush, that this would have similar ramifications for the small and middle market business for underwriting as well, is that they'll be able to do more, not just doing what they're doing better, but more stuff.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, I think the line we tend to use is, let people focus on the core and not the chore. The core is underwriting skills. Unfortunately, a lot of these people have got caught up with not just underwriting, but the chore of collecting data to underwrite. What we are trying to enable all of them is basically focus back on what they really need to focus on, which is really the underwriting aspect, and give them the call to actions. At the end of the day, we need to give them call to action so that they can act on things, versus really sort of looking through all the model to try to figure out which one do I need to work on. That's really not where their expertise is. That's not what they want to spend the time on, right? They want to spend the time on looking at all the exceptions. So whether you look at continuous underwriting or you look at individual transaction underwriting or renewal, we want to allow people to focus on this whole concept of here's the call to action, here's what you need to do, and you go from there. Not about I need to look at all the pieces of data, then decide what do I need to do, then go from there. That's not where the fun part of the job is for anyone.
Yeah. I love that line. I've never heard that before. Focus on the core, not the chore. That might be the title of this. I like that a lot, but that is also a good segue to the, I think a conversation that should be had between insurtechs and the industry in general, whether that be distribution, insurance carriers, reinsurers, so on, is that to your point, Piyush, there's so much pressure, business influence around just dealing with the chore, right? That there would be a struggle for them trying to implement this level of technology if they tried to build this themselves, wouldn't there be?
Again, I will always say the larger companies have always got the smarts to do anything,
Yeah.
right? So I will never question the level of smarts. I think it's just that the industry expertise that we bring in, the focus that we bring in to make these things happen, the experience that we get from across the industry to bring that to bear, the experience that we bring in with Friss having been in 42 countries, those are things that are not easy to replicate in an inside environment, right? That's the challenge in there. And and again, within the inside environment, there are a lot of other pressures that they go through about priorities, what needs to be done. And as you've heard, a lot of them are still focused on the core transformation of their core itself. So I think that's where we bring in the level of expertise, the focus to take these things on a much broader set across the board to get the industry on a much bigger plane and a much better footing that we can actually make these things happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think maybe to add to that is like I think for insurers that obviously they have enough capital and can invest in data scientists or connecting data sources themselves, right? And I think the big question there is where should they put their data science or that expertise to work? And I don't think like if you look at the level of complexity of connecting these data sources is one, but making sure that they keep running, that they're up to date, that if anything changes on the side of the vendor or on a website or on a social media platform, right? Then you have to update that. You have to go to your IT and ask for an update and there's no way that they are suited to be able to give that level of agility that we can offer. And then the question is, do you really want to do that, or is that really your USP? Is it how you're going to differentiate you as a carrier, or are you going to then look at from that data? Let's figure out what are the pockets of risk appetite, or where do we want to differentiate ourselves, and then leverage that data and put your data science to work on that. And I think that makes much more sense for a carrier to do so.
Completely, and I think that gets to the core of the core, right? It's what is your core functionality, and insurance itself, especially the commercial side, is so complex. I don't think there is any like central technology, central data point that is the differentiator. I sort of view it as like it's the string of decision making put together that then becomes part of the differentiator. Can you execute on this mission and put together a really effective string of data technology and just make appropriate underwriting decisions and business strategy decisions all the way through? And I think that sort of gets to the crux of it, right? Like, is this a core, right? The information is extremely valuable. The technology is extremely valuable, but that's not the core. And it almost seems like it's a for the data scientist, it's not building this part of it. It's, I think, the value add for those companies that actually have those resources. It's to use the data sciences to figure out, okay, what are we going to do with the information that comes out? That's the,
Yeah.
to me, that seems like more of a value add, if you ask me, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's totally agree. That supports our strategy as well. And we also look vision see ourselves as a partner to their data scientists, right? So we're not competing with the data scientists who has the best data scientists, and that we're in a comparison between, are we going to buy this or are we going to do this ourselves? We believe in partnering on that. So a lot of the data scientists love to have access to the data, love to have access to the sheer amount of data that insurers have, but they complain about the quality, they complain about, let's say, the level of completeness, and they complain about if once they've been able to build a model, that model is actually going to be used in production and learns from all the feedback in production, right? Our platform makes sure that they get multiple, and with especially with the Trine acquisition, we're talking about hundreds or over thousands of different data sets that we connect to our platform, that they get, and also make sure they're consistent and get the entity resolution on it, so that they actually can work with quality data. But also our platform is integrated with Guidewire, with Duck Creek, with Sapiens, with Snapsheet, with all those other platforms that actually is able to push those AI models and being actively used in production. And it's open, meaning that if they have additional models that they want to put an API on and include into our scoring, that's doable. That we do that all the time with our customers. But then actually you get to use those models in production, rather than just in a lab setting where you just where it just looks great in a lab setting, but it's never going to get used, or it's going to get used in a batch situation, which is just not useful in real life.
Yeah.
Right. So that's definitely how we look at it.
I almost view it as the biggest risk with trying to build it yourself is not the ability to build it, although most of the time it's challenging, right? It's usually more expensive and more time consuming than someone thinks it is. It's the ongoing cost that becomes problematic. It's almost like you take it for granted that we built it, right? That this thing will go. And my experience again has been that even things that get into production, right, go stale because they just can't keep up. There are new data sources that you have to have an entire mindset around this thing needs to be fresh and continuously fresh. So anything that's new that's sprouting out around it that wasn't in the first elements of it need to be incorporated in. It becomes a business of its own, which is, I think, gets to the core of the chore. Is your business going to be building this and maintaining it indefinitely out, or should you outsource it? And I always think of I heard WhatsApp, right? Their business model, they outsourced all of their communications to Twilio, right? And I think a lot of business strategists would say, "Ooh, that's risky because you're a communications platform." But their rationale around that was technology and communications is complex and evolving, and we don't want to have all of our resources internally having to have that expertise there and evolving over time as well. Our job is just to make sure that the messages get communicated back and forth and build that out. And I thought that was like a really solid lesson that insurers really should take to heart, is that, what is your core? Your leverage is capacity, right? And that's kind of your job and your mission, and everything else should really be outsourced. Comments?
And I can add a little bit to that. I think very much what Jeroen said is, what is the core for an insurance company? Capacity, selecting the programs that they want to be, make them the profitable programs by analyzing the data or the wealth of data that comes in. They deploy data scientists to analyze that against the loss ratios, against micro segmentation of the business that they're doing, to basically essentially figure out where am I going to make the maximum profit, and how do I segment, micro segment, whatever I need to do in that book with all the data and all the new variables that are coming in. So that's where they are going to come in. We might generate as a data aggregator 1,000 variables. They were collecting 100. Well, which of the other 900 are really going to be the golden nuggets, and which one becomes their competitive edge or the advantage based on their portfolio to decide which one I want to use? The chore is for them is collecting data. For us, the core is our expertise comes in bringing all this data together. Friss's capabilities, again, the same way, is taking all those data sources, figuring out where the pattern for the fraud is. For the terrain part that they acquired is collecting all that data and essentially saying, okay, how do I bring everything related to a risk profile together? Which ones are you going to use? That's their competitive advantage. Which variables will they value? That's their competitive advantage based on their portfolio of the book in there. So I think that's how at least we tend to look at it. So there's absolutely no competition. It's actually it's working together to get to that stage. That's really what we're trying to do.
Yeah, there's an added element, Piyush, that you brought up that just made me realize that with all of these data sources, right? In the traditional underwriting approach, it's highly actuarial based, based off of experience and loss experience.
Uh-huh.
We've now turned this corner, right? Very
Uh-huh.
interestingly, where we're getting access not only with the speed of the data, but the type of data. This data is not necessarily there's not an actuarial approach. Like, you need to move fast. You can't wait for the claims to actually process through. There's this nice combination, I think, with a traditional actuarial approach starting to merge with a predictive and a forecastable approach where, hey, this data is going to lead to something. You don't have to wait
Yes.
for the losses to actually come down the road. Like, this is telling you losses are coming, and you can actually get in front of this, or on a new business application, right? Like scanning through like some of your algorithms, you could have those data elements that says, well, the loss runs look good, but here are some data points that's telling you that's likely to change. There's an inflection point here. That brings a whole new dynamic to this, where it's really, underwriting is becoming almost a new discipline as a merger of data science and traditional actuarial underwriting, insurance related stuff. How do you guys, given the big shift that's occurred, how do you foresee this happening again? Like, will the stream of new data sets continue to arrive at us at this rapid rate? And if so, that does have ramifications for any carrier or reinsurer that might be trying to do this in-house.
I can take this on. I think the stream of data that we're going to get is only going to keep getting elevated. Okay.
Yep.
And it's going to get elevated at a pace that we cannot even imagine today. Just go back to, today, all the data sources. So today, if you actually look at the universe of data set that's aggregated to around 260 data sources for us, it's around 10,000 plus data sources aggregated across 260 that we are sort of using it and taking it on and going from there. So the number of data sources, the number of data points that you can understand about a risk is only going to keep expanding. So to your earlier point, the old actuarial approach used to be, you make a hypothesis and then you prove or disprove your hypothesis and you go from there. The data science is, I'm going to let data tell me what data tells me, right? So when you have all these data elements, it's impossible for a human brain to run a hypothesis over 4 variables and say these 4 variables have the weightage, and here's what I think the weightage should be. You need data scientists to really dig through that thousands of pieces of variables to find your golden nuggets and prove it to them against the loss ratios as to which ones are acting, and then sort of take that hypothesis and then go from there. But the hypothesis is not human tribal knowledge, past experience driven, but by really data driven at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
then proving it out, disproving it. So that's really where I think Jeroen said it well. The data scientists and the actuaries and the home office underwriting or the underwriters are going to be a very, very powerful combination and the competitive advantage within an insurance company that's going to be supported by, you know, I'm going to use Jeroen's word again, is by people like us who are flanking all around that whole ecosystem. We're going to flank around that and empower them, but that ecosystem's got to be supported that way.
Yeah. It's these
And
kinds
I
of
think, sorry,
it's these kinds of conversations that I think really shed a light on the new paradigm that we're in.
yeah, because and to add to that as well, I think the level of data that's currently available and easily processable is going to increase as well, right? So we're obviously in the past there was structured data like an ISO, but then and now we're using a lot of unstructured data and social media data. I mean, video, images. There's so much more that we're incorporating already into our stream, right? That is just hard to process, and yeah, it's going to be exponential. The growth that we will see on the data feed. Yeah.
I want to share with you guys an example of how, because I think the bulk of what you're doing is in the casualty side of property casualty, although there's an actual I think property element to this, but I want to give you an example of a natural catastrophe element to this. After on our residential flood book, after the massive hurricane season we had last year, we did have a claim on the residential stuff, but it was in Michigan, and it was because of a dam failure. And after review of that, we realized that the dam had been cited. It was a privately owned dam. The dam had been cited for, safety violations and all of that. That is actually information that could have been caught.
Yes.
Like it was there for the taking, and it's I find it like inspiring. Like to me, it was like we got this claim. The learning from that, we gladly paid the claim. It was worth it because there's a new paradigm here, and this is a natural catastrophe where you think I think a lot of the data that's collected on your end, a lot of underwriters may not think it merges very well with natural catastrophe, where it's more about weather and what's the construction of the home. But I think it's just a lack of imagination, like because we can't imagine that new data streams being able to help us, we create this fictitious wall around us. But in fact, I think similar to the lines of business that you've been working with, I think it's going to be across the board. We're going to be inundated with a whole bunch of new data that can absolutely make our lives more interesting in how we evaluate risk.
Yep.
Yeah. So this it's absolutely fascinating to have these conversations, because I feel like the appropriate place to have these, Piyush, is in a bar in Chicago with
I'd love to.
with some deep dish pizza. Jeroen, I don't know if you've how often you've had deep dish pizza.
No.
Not very often.
Once. That was enough. Yeah.
I'm good for one slice before I have to call it quits. But
that's correct.
But this is the kind of thing where it's companies like Friss, companies like Jeroen, and the merger of you two. I like the flanking aspect of it, because it for the right companies and for those that are listening out there, I think the trick here when trying to work with insurtechs is the learning aspect of it. It is instead of focusing on the core, you should focus on the core, not the chore. I think that's the part of it. It spurs the imagination about what you could do, right? And I think that's the valuable element of it. It will make your books better today, but it's the future element of it. It's what you can do, what you can focus on, what you should be focused on. So Thank you guys. Next time we do this, let's maybe we'll meet in Vegas for ITC and we'll do this over a beer
Oh,
and
for sure.
yes, and a steak instead of deep dish pizza. How about that?
Yeah, that's much better. I'm not a
That
big
sounds
fan of
good.
steak, but I
Yeah.
am looking forward to meeting you in person again. And it's been a pleasure with you to be on the road, and we all miss it, I guess. And then ITC might be a right timing for all of us to feel safe and be back on the road.
Well, let's do that and let's continue the
Thank-
conversation in Vegas. Piyush, it
Thank
was
you, Nick. Thank you so much for your time. It's a pleasure. And I appreciate the pointers and learnings from you too in this whole process.
absolutely. So keep up the good work, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
Thank you.